welcome to our members live stream about Victorian Christmas traditions. I am Marie Walker and I am the Director of Education here at the Northeast Georgia History Center, and it is my absolute joy to come to you today via the internet to tell you about some of our favorite Christmas traditions and where they came from, really, because it's really fascinating. The things that we're going to be learning today is basically the origins of a lot of our favorite Christmas traditions come from the Victorian era. So, Victorian Christmas traditions. In the early 19th century, so the early 1800s, Christmas really wasn't celebrated as a national holiday. It was a religious holiday that Christians celebrated as they celebrate the birth of their Savior on December 25th, but it wasn't a big to-do. It was the Christians go to church and might have a nice dinner, and that's it. It was very a solemn occasion that just was very religious in nature. It was not a big secular holiday. But that would change during the Victorian times. So by the end of the Victorian era, that was a thing of the past. So Christmas celebrations past. It wasn't always that solemn tradition. Really, until the 4th century, Christians could celebrate anywhere between early January and late September the birth of Christ. The Bible does not actually say that Jesus was born on December 25th and this is his birthday. It doesn't necessarily give an exact date. It just says that it gives, in Luke 2, it gives the entire account of the birth of Christ, but it doesn't say, and then on this day, and even if they did, it wouldn't say December 25th because they use a whole different calendar. But so Christians would always celebrate the birth of Christ, but it could literally be anywhere from, as the slide says, from early January to September. December really wasn't an option. A lot of times it was celebrated during the summer months, and that would be when that would be celebrated. But Pope Julius I adopted the 25th of December as the official celebration of the birth of Christ. And that was in the 4th century. So from the 4th century onward, Christians begin to celebrate the birth of Christ on December 25th. And that, we think that one of the reasons Pope Julius I decided on December 25th is that's very close to the pagan celebration of Yule. So Yule, we'll talk about that in a little bit, happens on the winter solstice. And on the winter solstice, it's a celebration of Yule. It is the shortest day of the year. And then at that time, in our northern hemisphere, the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and then you have the shortest day, and then the light returns, and then it's a celebration of the return of the light. So when you have Europe becoming more Christian, and some people who are still holding on to the old ways, this kind of blurs the line and makes it to where the people who are celebrating Yule, well, the Christians can be like, oh, well, actually you're celebrating Christmas. And all of the merrymaking can be attributed to whatever one you want. So it's an interesting, that is one of the reasons why on December 25th we celebrate Christmas. And Christmas really means Christ's Mass. So it is Christ as in Christ the Savior, and then Mass as in the service of Mass. So it's really like the Mass of Christ, which means like the church service of Christ. So Yule, the one I was talking about before. Yule is that pagan celebration of the return of the light. Celebrates, it depends on exactly what region you're looking at for what exactly that is. So you have the Germanic peoples, you have the more Nordic peoples, you have the Celtic peoples, and they all have a celebration that is somewhat usually called Yule or attributed to Yule, but they celebrate various deities in whatever more section they are in. So there's not one that I can say like, and it is this one, because it would be different for all of those different groups for the most part. But there are a lot of similarities between these Yule celebrations. A lot of that is the burning of the Yule log, which we still think of today as a Christmas tradition. And the Yule log, it's a big log, and when it is burnt, it would be thought that every like you know, when you have a fire and there's kind of like an ember that like flies off, it was thought that that ember would represent the birth of a new farm animal that you would have, which I thought was an interesting tradition. Another thing that we also is attributed to Yule is the evergreens, holly, and mistletoe, all considered to be sacred, especially to the Druids. And they would cut down mistletoe, and there's a lot of different stories that go along with mistletoe, but it's all always a sacred plant. Some people have stories of, well, when people were fighting in a forest and they came upon mistletoe, they would all have to break, as it was a sign that they should stop fighting, or people would use mistletoe to ward off evil spirits and hang it over their door. Lots of various things. It also is considered to bring fertility. So kissing under the mistletoe to bring a baby, things like that. So there's a lot of different attributes to mistletoe and why it is hung, and the tradition of kissing under the mistletoe. There's also wassail. So wassailing, we have a Christmas song that goes, "Here we go, a wassailing around the leaves are green." But what is wassailing? It's a good question. Sometimes wassail is considered a drink, like a spice punch drink nowadays. But wassailing in the context of Yule is to go about singing joyously and boisterously. It is to go out and basically kind of like caroling, but a carol is more of a religious song. So they wouldn't be singing carols perhaps, unless it's a religious Yule song. So, but nowadays, Yule is usually used as an alternative term for Christmas, and it has existed in the English language as an alternate to Christmas for a long time, even though they are technically two very separate holidays. So Tudor Christmas was an incredibly boisterous affair. So I'm pointing to Tudor Christmas because Christmas traditions and Yule traditions have kind of blended, and especially in England in the Tudor times, Christianity is the rule of the land. It's considered the national. It was Catholicism, but then King Henry VIII split and created the Church of England. So now England is all Protestant, which we will be having a live stream about later in January. So I'm not going to go into it too much because we could be here all day if I were to talk about the English Reformation. But so England is now Anglican, celebrating the birth of Christ at Christmas, and Tudor Christmas was huge. It starts with Advent, which Christians had been celebrating for a very long time, with the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. And Advent, it became that Advent was a very solemn time, a time of prayer, of reflection, of preparation for Christ to come, and fasting. And then on Christmas, that begins the 12 days of Christmas with feasting and partying and celebration because Christ has come. So the 12 days of Christmas are not the 12 days leading up to Christmas. That is still Advent. The 12 days of Christmas start on Christmas Day and then go through Epiphany, which is when the celebration of the coming of the 3 wise men or the 3 kings. So, and also that's sometimes called Twelfth Night, and that would be, you would have a big party on Christmas, and then you would have like an even bigger party on 12th night because that's the end of the Christmas season. There would be no work during the 12 days of Christmas. People would actually decorate with holly and ivy, like we talked about. They would bring that into their homes. They would decorate the spinning wheels, and almost like they would wind it through the spindles of their spinning wheels because there was no work to be done, and the decorations would keep them from working. Basically, it's to secure that no work is going to be done, that this is a time of celebration, of not working. Of course, people who were working, taking care of children and animals, would still need to feed them. But that would be really the tending of the animals, and if you were a caretaker of other humans, you would also still be working, but perhaps not as laboriously. You wouldn't be doing as much, hopefully. But Tudor Christmas was a huge affair, and it was very, very, very large and very celebratory. You would have the Boar's Head Carol. That's one of the oldest Christmas carols that we have recorded, and that is from 1521 is when that carol is actually written down that we have record of. Of course, there might be some older. We think We Wish You a Merry Christmas might be older than that, but it wasn't necessarily written down, or if it was, we don't have record of it. But the Boar's Head Carol would be part of the feast that would happen on Christmas, and there would be a boar's head, like a big boar's head with an apple in its mouth, and it would be carried into the great feast hall where King Henry VIII was. And there would be people who would be carrying the boar's head, and there would also be a soloist. And it's a little bit of a call and response type of chorus of carol, where there would be the soloist who would sing, and then everyone would sing, and they would, as they the choir would sing, they would process in with the boar's head, and then when the soloist started to sing, they would stop. And then they would process in, and then they would stop, then process in, and they would stop as they sang the Boar's Head Carol. It was part of the procession. And this is a very, very old tradition, and some people actually still do it. One of the colleges in Georgia, Oglethorpe College, still does this every Christmas season, and it's part of one of their honor society's inductions. But it's a big affair, and they have the Boar's Head. They do the Boar's Head Carol, and as well as their induction into their honor society. And there are also some other colleges, some in England, like Queen's College at Oxford still does it, and some other places too, which is, it's interesting that they've been doing it for so long. Or maybe you would like to start the Boar's Head Carol tradition at your house and carry in a boar's head to your feast. Minced pies were an incredibly tasty treat that would be happening as part of this Christmas feast. Minced pies, they would have lamb in them a lot of times they would have lamb in them to symbolize the shepherds that the angels appeared to in the account of the birth of Christ. Okay, so you have all of this wonderful Tudor Christmas. They get gifts, they sing carols, they have a Boar's Head ceremony, the 12 days of Christmas, the whole 9 yards, and then the Puritans killed all the fun and banned all the fun stuff of Christmas and said, no, we're only going to go to church, and that's it. We're not going to have 12 days of partying, because Puritans were not exactly known as fun people. They were very strict. Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England. So after the Tudor period, when they had the English Civil War, you have Oliver Cromwell who comes into power. He basically bans Christmas. All of these big fun Christmas traditions, and said, no, we're going to purify this of all the celebratory nature that is not celebrating just the birth of Christ. And now we're all just going to go to church and maybe eat something a little bit. So we really don't see a lot of these Christmas traditions come back or get added to until the Victorian times, when the Puritans have kind of gone away. And then the Victorians, who are obsessed with recreating the past, they want this old English Christmas back. The Victorians have been Christmas starved for a long time, and they want to have the fun things again. And because the Victorians are so interested in medieval England and all of the things that are traditionally English, harkening all the way back to Tudor times and before, the Victorians really bring this back and create a fun Christmas again, with all of the trimmings and the carols and the traditions that go along with it. So the royal family was a huge influence on making Christmas even more mainstream. So there were a whole lot of factors that we're going to be talking about today that really bring these Christmas traditions back back to the forefront of everyone's mind and really continue to this day. And the royal family was a very large part of that, but they weren't necessarily the only reason. There were a lot of contributing factors that made this like Christmas explosion, if you will, happen. So the royal family, so they, as we see in this lovely picture here, we have the royal family decorating a Christmas tree. So a Christmas tree, it's a very old symbol. It goes back to ancient Egypt and ancient Rome as a symbol of everlasting. It's just because evergreens, they stay green all the time, so it's a symbol of steadfastness, of everlastingness. And people would bring these into their home because they're one of the few green things that to survive the winter. So to have greenery decorate your home was very, it was pretty, and people would do that to remind themselves that spring is going to return after this harsh winter. So in the 16th century, devout Christians brought decorated trees into their homes in Germany. A lot of people credit Martin Luther with this, who is really the spark that set off the Protestant Reformation, was Martin Luther nailing those theses to the church door. And he is also credited with adding candles to the Christmas tree. Now, it sounds like a terrible idea to put candles onto an old dried tree, but apparently it worked, and not everyone burned down the entire country of Europe, so it seems like it went okay. But Martin Luther is usually credited with the adding of candles to the Christmas tree. The story goes is that he was walking home one night and he was looking up through the evergreen trees, the fir trees, and the stars were sparkling in the night sky, and it was so beautiful that he wanted to recreate the scene to share with his family. So when he came home, they brought the tree in, and then they added candles to represent like the stars in the night sky, and it was very, very pretty, and people thought it was very beautiful and wanted to emulate it and would continue to do so. The Christmas tree is also an old Yule custom to decorate trees. So people have been doing this for a very, very long time, but then we see in Germany in the 16th century, Christians really taking that on and making it a symbol of Christmas as well. So this engraving was published in 1848. This is an engraving of Queen Victoria, Prince Albert, one of their maids, and then 6 of their children, all gathered around the Christmas tree. And when this engraving was published, it spread like wildfire. Everyone saw this beautiful family, this beautiful royal family, gathered around the Christmas tree and said, "I want one." Because this is a time where print, newspapers, publications such as Godey's Lady's Book, magazines, you could get your hands on them fairly easily, and were disseminated worldwide. And this helped spread the idea of Christmas trees, of celebrating Christmas, and a more bringing back these old traditions that people had kind of forgotten about, that just bringing them back, and people wanted to do this during the Victorian times. The idea of the family, the nuclear family, was also very strong. So to see the picture of the nuclear family gathered around doing an activity together made other people want to do that, to emulate their family doing like what the royals did. Also, Queen Victoria was just such a huge celebrity. Everything she did, everyone else wanted to do. She had very little political power, but tremendous social power. Another interesting thing about this tree, it looks a little different than what we would consider like a normal Christmas tree. It looks like it's missing branches here. And that was done on purpose. This was a very Germanic tradition. Prince Albert had this tree brought in from his homeland in Germany, and it was a German custom. You would get a shorter tree, and you would put it on a table, and then you would like cut out the middle sections of the branches. I think probably, this is just my theory, is because of the candles, so you don't catch everything on fire. And then you would also hang the ornaments on the tree, but a lot of times you would also put like the toys and the presents on the tree, not just under the tree. So you would have, this one, it shows both. Sometimes people would just put their their Christmas gifts on the tree, so they're usually smaller gifts, like an orange. Oranges were very popular Christmas gifts. Also popular Christmas tree decorations because they're both. So this is just an interesting thing. Also that goes back to a more Yule customs of decorating trees. Sometimes they would leave them outside, but they would decorate it with food for the animals. But this is a very interesting scene that really popularized the Christmas tree. Once we go to America, because of course this was published in America, actually, I thought it was an incredibly interesting factoid to me. We have a engraving very similar to this one at the beginning of this program, if you remember seeing that next to my face just a few minutes ago. It's the exact same, except Queen Victoria isn't wearing a tiara. They're a little closer together because it's a little narrower, and Prince Albert doesn't have his sash on. And this was to appeal to an American audience who still didn't really like the British aristocracy or British monarchy, because this is only not even a century after the American Revolution. So America still doesn't have all of the warm fuzzies for British monarchy yet. That comes around in later, where America becomes like BFFs with Britain again for a little bit, and for a good bit. They make friends again. But this one, they're still not like super big. They Americanized the royal family is basically what happened in the American engraving, which I thought was just a really interesting thing. But yes, this photo right here is one of the main reasons we have Christmas trees. And the American photo, which looks almost just like this one, really popularized it in America. But the interesting thing about when it came to America liked big trees, which does not surprise me at all. America likes big things. So America, they wanted full trees. They didn't want to put their tree on a little table, and they didn't cut the branches out. So that's where we really get our idea of like the American Christmas tree. It's a full length thing. Not to say people didn't do this in America. People definitely still had the small trees that they put on tables in America because they wanted to emulate Great Britain, especially in the early Victorian era, in the early 1860s, when this is really just catching on. But by the end of the Victorian era, you see the big trees taking over. So A Christmas Carol, the novel by Charles Dickens, was published on December 19th, 1843. So a few years before that engraving we just saw. This also brought so much attention to Christmas and what Christmas means, how we are to keep Christmas in our hearts all year long. It was just really the 1840s is when we have this wave of Christmas fever, if you will, of people wanting to celebrate something good, because it was also known as the Hungry 40s. There was a lot of political things going on in Great Britain. There were a lot of famines that were going on, and people wanted something hopeful. And what's more hopeful than Christmas time? That's one of the things that we associate with Christmas time is hope. So this was an instant bestseller. Charles Dickens was not sure if this was going to go well. He had had some other works that were previously published. He had great success with his first works. Right before this, he wasn't doing so great with the publishing of his other stories. And his publishers weren't really sure if they wanted to take a chance on this Christmas story about ghosts. They were like, I don't know. I'm not sure if people are going to really like this. Christmas is like kind of getting a little bit more popular, but it really isn't that popular yet, Charles. We're not going to publish it. So Charles Dickens ended up having to front his own money to publish his book. It was kind of like a self-publishing deal. And I would love to see those publishers' faces when like all of his copies sold out within a very, very short amount of time, and they had to reprint. And it came out almost 170 something years ago. I'm not that great at math. Tomorrow. Its publishing date is his publishing anniversary is tomorrow. So it came out right before Christmas. Everyone's getting ready, and it was just the story of Scrooge and Marley and these ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future all come together to create this Christmas tale of thinking about those in need and to really be compassionate, and to that this is a season of giving and thinking about others, and especially the children. Gotta love little tiny Tim. An interesting thing about this is it wasn't originally supposed to be a novel. It wasn't originally supposed to be a Christmas tale. Charles Dickens had really sat down and he wanted to bring attention to the plight of the poor, especially the impoverished children, and the attitudes regarding the poor. And he was going to write like a political pamphlet, and then it just kind of turned into a Christmas carol for various reasons. And we see a little bit of that. And a usually forgotten about passage of the Christmas carol is the Ghost of Christmas Present. There are two children that come out from under his billowing cloak at the end before he leaves, and there is the boy child and the girl child, who are both representing destitute children who are hungry and in want, and really a remembrance of those children. So we see that that crossover of that original intent of writing this political pamphlet to bring attention to the plight of the poor, to the poor children there especially. But it really today is more of a tale about just generosity and giving in general. But Scrooge does embody a lot of the attitudes of the time about Christmas and the poor. Is a lot of people were exactly like Scrooge, and they didn't really care about Christmas. Christmas wasn't that big of a deal to them like it is to us today. And he really was Scrooge was an embodiment of his time, and also the time before him. And also, we still have Scrooges with us today. So it's a tale that transcends time and continues to be applicable, and also is one of the novels that really secured the popularity of Christmas. So Christmas caroling. Victorians had this great rebirth of Christmas carols. So the Puritans had kind of banned most of them, and now they're coming back with a flourishing of jingle bells and all of these wonderful Christmas traditional carols that we think of today. So this also kind of harkens back to the Yule tradition of wassailing, of going about joyously singing. So there were old traditions of going door to door for figgy pudding, like in We Wish You a Merry Christmas. That was a very old English custom where usually it would be those of a lower class would go to the fancy houses of the rich people and ask for food, basically, while singing, to sing for their dinner, which is also a very another old kind of custom of the farming hierarchy and aristocracy, going back to very, very olden times, medieval times. So this is kind of a continuation of that, especially in Tudor times. That was very much a thing of going door to door singing, and it would then be customary to give those people to give them food, to give them treats. So there's also the idea of wassailing, which would be we have the wassail, which is also considered a drink, and then there would be a piece of toast in the bottom of it, and some old stories go that that's how you get the idea. Once it was all drunk, then you would give the toast to the most important person in the room, like the toast that was in the bottom of the punch bowl, which I don't know why you would want the soggy toast, but the most important person would get the soggy toast. And that's where we get the term of like toasting people today. It would be from that. I'm not necessarily certain about the historical accuracy of that story, but I think it's an interesting story nonetheless of perhaps a history of the term. So not only do we have a rebirth of Christmas carols, we have songs like Jingle Bells, Good King Wenceslas. We have We Three Kings, Silent Night. I think A Little Town of Bethlehem also gets written during the Victorian time. So we have more winter songs like Jingle Bells coming about. We also have more traditional, very much religious themed songs as well. And there it is. Everyone's writing them. That's where we get so many of those Christmas songs. Silent Night was actually written in German, and it's not translated until later. So if you ever see them singing a Silent Night in a Christmas carol and it's not in German, then it's historically inaccurate because they hadn't translated it yet. But when you see Silent Night sung in German, that's the original language that it was written in. Because a lot of times you'll see that in various programs, which is just an interesting, it's an interesting fact. So we have all of those carols really coming together, being written, so many, this great rebirth of Christmas carols, this idea of caroling. We also have old songs becoming popular again, like We Wish You a Merry Christmas and A Boar's Head Carol makes a little bit of a comeback. But this time, in the Victorian times, we see carolers not going necessarily door to door, but just going and gathering in a public space. Or they would gather in a public space and then they might go from door to door to door. But we have more of the idea of them singing in a public space, like everyone going to the town square and singing in the gazebo as people pass by, is where we get the idea of Victorian carolers a little bit more of. Which was not necessarily something that was done before that. So we see a little more, an addition to that tradition. All right, The Night Before Christmas. One of the most famous Christmas poems that also enhances the legend of the Christmas tale of Saint Nicholas or Santa Claus. So The Night Before Christmas was published on December 23rd of 1823. By Clement Clark Moore, but there is some controversy over the authorship. There is another family that claims that their father had written it and that was a tradition in their house, but then he didn't claim authorship, and Clement Clark Moore was indeed the first person to step forward and claim authorship of said poem. So at this point, it's one family's word against another family's word, and there's not a whole lot of concrete proof that can be proven. So for this purposes of this, we are going to say that it is by Clement Clark Moore with some controversy. It was originally called A Visit from St. Nicholas, not A Night Before Christmas. That is a more modern name that goes with the first line of the poem, which was, A night before Christmas, all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, with hope that St. Nicholas would soon to be there. And this is where we get the names of Santa's reindeer. This is where the names first appear of Santa's reindeer. Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, he's been around for a while. We'll talk about him in just a little bit. But this is where we first see reindeer mentioned with Santa Claus concretely in a poem. But there's only 8. Comet, Cupid, Donner, Blitzen. We see them. We don't actually see Rudolph. Rudolph is not mentioned in this poem. We actually don't get Rudolph added to Santa's team until the 1930s with the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Up until that time, through all of the Victorian tradition, it's just 8 reindeer. This poem also has a lot of Dutch references. So, in a little bit, we'll talk a little bit about St. Nicholas and his relationship to Dutch culture. But it has a lot of Dutch references that of Santa Claus and the reindeer and this kind of mythical sleigh that he gets to ride around and to bring bring toys to the children. So this is also, I think, one of the first times where we see Santa, his sleigh, the reindeer. Santa described as a jolly old elf coming down a chimney. All of this is this imagery, this legend that has been kind of come up around Santa Claus. We can trace a lot of it back to this poem that was published in 1823, which was right before, like I said, it took a while for Christmas to really like have that explode, that rebirth of a large, more national celebration, and not just going to church, and for all these traditions to come back. So we have it really, here we see it kind of starting in the 1820s. We see it really starting at the beginning of the 1800s, and then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until the 1840s, which is when it catches just on fire because people, it's a sad time. A lot of really bad things were going on in the 40s, and people wanted something to celebrate, to be hopeful about, and well, Christmas provided an opportunity to express that. So here we are with Santa Claus. So Santa Claus is really based on Saint Nicholas, who is from the 3rd century, who is indeed a saint, and he was known for his anonymous gifts of charity. So one of the stories that goes with Saint Nicholas is that he was a monk who lived in the 3rd century, who would go about and he would give anonymous gifts of charity, very much like our idea of Santa Claus today. He gives children gifts really anonymously. We never see him. He comes, he gives the gifts, and he leaves. And this is based on this tradition. One of the most famous stories of Saint Nicholas is there was a gentleman with 3 daughters, and these 3 daughters, they wanted to be able to get married, but they needed to have a dowry in order to do that, and their father was poor and was unable to provide a dowry for them. So there are several versions of this story, but one of the stories, the most famous versions of this story, is St. Nicholas came and he threw gold coins down the chimney, and it landed in the girls' stockings that had been hung by the chimney. And that's where we get the idea of Santa Claus giving gifts and hanging stockings by the chimney, is because of the actual St. Nicholas who lived in the 3rd century. So then St. Nick's Dutch nickname is Sinterklaas, which you can imagine Americans pronouncing as Santa Claus very easily. So that is where the direct Santa Claus comes from, is Sinterklaas, which is the nickname for St. Nicholas in Dutch. So Thomas Nast drew on More's poem to create the first likeness that matched our modern image of Santa Claus in 1881, and that is this image right here. So it was published in several different American publications, but here we have Santa. He's this jolly old elf with a big white beard and white hair and a big red suit. It looks almost like nightgowns to me, and he's quite a jolly fellow. He has this armful of presents for the children, and he's also smoking a long pipe, which has since vanished from our image of Santa Claus. At least I don't picture him with a long stemmed pipe. He also has a sword, which that's fun, but I think it's a toy sword for a child. But this is really our first image of Santa Claus, and that happens in 1881. So this is almost 60 years after the original poem, A Night Before Christmas, or A Visit from St. Nicholas, has occurred. So there's a large amount of time where Santa Claus is still in the public imagination, but there's not necessarily an image for him other than what people imagined after reading the description in the poem. But as we know, with books and movies and literature, sometimes our imagined idea is not like what the newspaper or the media would have that character look like. But once that character does appear in media, well, then that's what everyone points to. So that's what everyone would point to when you say St. Nicholas or Santa Claus. And that is from, indeed, 1881. So that's when we have our first image of Santa Claus. So Christmas stockings. So like I said in the other slide, St. Nicholas would put gold coins into the stockings of these three poor sisters. Sometimes people would say that he threw it through the window and it landed in the stockings, or he threw it down the chimney and it landed in the stockings, or some people would say, well, he just like threw it into the house and it didn't necessarily land in a stocking. But that would be that's all. They're all it happened in some way, and people would hang stockings to celebrate St. Nicholas on his feast day, which would be on December 6th. So that very much got blurred into the celebration of Christmas because it's in December. If you have a birthday in December, you know usually that gets blurred in with Christmas too. Same thing happened to St. Nicholas's feast day. It kind of got blurred into the celebration of Christmas, especially with the idea of St. Nicholas and Santa Claus coming and being associated with Christmas over the many, many, many years that this was celebrated. I believe that this is indeed a Dutch custom that then just kind of got incorporated into the larger national celebration of Christmas around several different countries. There's not a whole lot of hard historical evidence of like when people started hanging stockings. It's just kind of thing people have done. But it seems to very much be related to St. Nicholas and his giving anonymous gifts of charity to people. So Christmas presents. So the exchanging of gifts at New Year's has happened for a very, very long time. You could trace that back to Roman customs. And then it seems like once it was decided that Christmas was going to be on the 25th officially, that it kind of got blurred because the 25th and New Year's very, very close together. New Year's also is incorporated into the 12 days of Christmas. So you have Christmas starting on the 25th, goes until January 6th, which is Epiphany. And as the song 12 Days of Christmas goes, it would be customary to give a gift throughout that time, which would include New Year's, also includes Christmas, also includes 12th night. So it would be a large festival of gift giving. That's when Christmas presents kind of started, is because it all kind of got, like I said, a lot of things kind of get mooshed together to create a lot of our Christmas traditions and customs. And that's one of those. So by the 1820s, though, stores began to advertise Christmas shopping. So that's when, that was when in the 1820s, that same decade that The Night Before Christmas poem gets published, that's when we start to see more Christmas things coming into popular culture. And then by the 1840s, newspapers created separate section for holiday advertisements. And 1840s, Christmas is here. It is here to stay. It's a national holiday and it's super duper popular. The royal family celebrates it. Charles Dickens wrote a book about it, and it is there. Also, did not mention that during the royal family slide, but Victoria and Albert were actually not the first to have a Christmas tree as a royal family. The royal family had been German for a very, very long time, going back to the first George. They had Christmas trees as a royal family before, but they weren't popular necessarily, or did not become popular with the English people because advertising of being able to be seen. It would just be a Christmas tree for the royal family. No one really knew that they had one. They did not see an image of it. It wasn't until Victoria and Albert had that painting or that engraving of them with the Christmas tree that everyone else knew about it. So it's kind of like if you're the first to do something, but no one knows you're the first to do something, are you really the first to do something? If a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, did it actually fall? That's kind of the properties of, well, Victoria and Albert weren't the first to have a Christmas tree, and it's true, but they were first to make it popular. So here we see two little Victorian children exchanging a gift. This is, on the bottom of it, it does say, "We wish you a happy and bright new year," though, which again goes back to the exchanging of gifts at New Year's as well as Christmas. So the lines kind of get blurred, but it seems like Christmas has, especially in our culture and day and age, as well as in the Victorian day and age, gift giving is much more thought of with Christmas rather than New Year's nowadays. So Christmas cards. The last one that we just saw was indeed a Christmas card or a New Year's card, but we don't see Christmas cards coming out until 1843. So we see a lot of the 1840s Christmas explosion. But of course, it has been building up to that for a long time, really starting in the 1820s. So 1843, the first Christmas card was produced commercially. So people had been sending Christmas letters. My family, we send Christmas cards and Christmas letters. Sometimes people just send letters. Sometimes people just send cards. Those have both been traditions for a long time. Christmas letters have actually been going on longer though, because Henry Cole didn't have time to write his long Christmas letter to all of his relatives to tell him what he had been doing that year and how he has been doing. So he thought, I don't have time for this, I'm just going to send a card. And it will be a nice card that just says best wishes at Christmas. And that will be great. And that'll be done. And he had 1,000 cards printed. And like all those he didn't need, he put up for sale. And he sold out. And people wanted these cards. And a lot of these cards, if you just Google Victorian Christmas cards, they're not what you would think are on them. It's a lot of cats. There's a lot of cats on Victorian Christmas cards doing various different things, like human things. Here we have birds walking with an umbrella. This is the kind of imagery you see on Victorian Christmas cards, which honestly just puzzles me. I think it's incredibly delightful, but it's not what I would immediately go, ah yes, Christmas, birds walking together in the snow. They're just really fun. There's a lot of frogs as well, just doing various different things and wishing people a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year as they do it. It's if you need a laugh, just Google Victorian Christmas cards. They're quite delightful and sometimes can get very strange. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about where a lot of those Christmas traditions and customs come from. They've been going on for a very, very long time. They have gained and waned in popularity, but a lot of them we do indeed still do today, and a lot of those traditions that we do today are indeed rooted in, or were repopularized during the Victorian tradition, during the Victorian era. So if we have any questions, I would be happy to take them now at this time, and hopefully I can answer them.
So Cindy was wondering if Charles Dickens was directing his Christmas Carol message directly to the English government to take better care of the poor, because you mentioned that it was originally inspired by this pamphlet he was making. Can you give a little more context as to, during his time, what was the status of the poor and that sort of the difference between the classes?
Yes, so England during this time was very much had a very high hierarchy of class structure, and Charles Dickens had actually himself been raised very, very poor. His father, we think, probably dealt with alcoholism and could not pay debts and ended up in debtor's prison. The family ended up working in what some people would consider workhouses or factories to attempt to pay off said debt. So we have, Scrooge mentions workhouses, poorhouses, where the poor would go and to work. And this was very much a thing during the Victorian era, especially the early Victorian times. and it wouldn't be until later where reform would happen and workhouses would be done away with. But people thought, like, oh, well, there's the workhouses to take care of these people. Like, I don't need to worry about that. Where indeed the workhouses were terrible conditions that these people were living in, and people still needed to care about them to make their lives better. So Charles Dickens very much had an intimate relationship and understanding of the poor and being poor, because that's how he was raised himself. And he went, he worked his way out of it, or was able to rise to be one of the most famous authors of all time. But he never forgot about where he came from and to help people who were in his same situation. And I think the book, I can't necessarily speak directly into the mind of Dickens. I think the book was not just directed at the government. I think it was directed to the people as a whole, to all of English society, because it wasn't just the government who didn't care about the poor. It was all of society who kind of had this general attitude of not caring about the poor. So I think it was more or less directed to all of English society, because during this time we just had the 30s, where there was a lot of different radical change. The 1840s did not have that much change. It was very much a very, like, okay, we just had, like, sometimes it's referred to almost like as the revolution in the 30s, because there was just so much reform going on. And then the 40s kind of did nothing. So even though all of this reform had just happened, more people were able to vote. So now I think Dickens is appealing more to the general public to say, remember when you vote about, remember the poor when you vote about poor reform, and to just be aware of this. And also just to internalize that yourself, to be kind to other people, especially those less fortunate during this time of year. That Dickens was really trying to express.
Were there any fashions that were specifically popular during Christmas during the Victorian era?
Oh, that's interesting. The question of fashion and Christmas going together. I can't think of any particular one trend that was just to go with Christmas, like how we have Christmas sweaters today. I don't think there was one that was necessarily just to go with that. You see more in paintings and depictions, but they're not like historical photographs or anything. You see more people wearing like holly or ivy or red or green, because Christmas colors were still a thing back then. So you might see a little bit more of that, but I don't think there was not like a particular fashion trend or style that would go just with Christmas itself. There might be perhaps more nods to the season, perhaps, but I don't think anyone's going to go out and have a whole dress made just for Christmas. But if they already had a red or a green dress, they might say, well, I'll wear this for Christmas because I already have it.
Is Boxing Day a Victorian tradition?
Oh, yes. So Boxing Day. Boxing Day is an interesting one. I think Boxing Day did come about during the Victorian era. So Boxing Day is also the second day of Christmas, which is also this day, the feast of Saint Stephen. So in Good King Wenceslas, it talks about Good King Wenceslas. He looked out on the feast of Stephen. And that's a carol that was written for the second day of Christmas, which is known as Boxing Day in the UK and some of the Commonwealth countries. Which, if you look up Boxing Day, there's not like a great definition of what exactly it is, other than it's the day after Christmas. So I think a better definition of Boxing Day is it is the second day of Christmas, which is the feast of Saint Stephen, which is a day of remembering the poor, of charitable acts, which Good King Wenceslas did. He looked out on the feast of Stephen. He saw a man who was trying to just get fuel to warm himself, and ends up giving him food and wine, and remembering to bless the poor, and in that you yourself find blessing.
So I think this will be our last question. What were popular Christmas presents during the Victorian era? You had mentioned oranges,
Yes.
but what else was popular?
So, like I said, in the 1820s and the 1840s, we start to see Christmas advertisements that are very much directed towards people buying things for Christmas presents. So, just popular toys of the time, dolls, little toy drums, little horses and little figurines of animals, just normal toys during the Victorian era that would then be for Christmas. A lot of times, especially in America, especially during the American Civil War and post-war, where you have a lot of economic depression and families not being able to buy consumer goods, they would make things. So making mittens or a scarf, or you can buy those things as well. Perhaps a hat or something like that. They would usually be smaller gifts that could indeed fit under the tree or fit on the tree. Would be popular things that you could do, a tie or a cravat for the father, maybe a pocket watch, things like that.
Oh, we do have one last question. We have a question about the Yule goat, and there's a goat. Yes, if you're not familiar, I was just looking up because I wasn't familiar either, but there's a famous illustration of a Santa Claus-like figure riding a goat. And yes, apparently the Yule goat is a Scandinavian as well as a Germanic pagan tradition, and where representations of the Yule goat would be made of straw. So I guess if you haven't come across that, something
I had not come across the Yule goat.
Well, thank you for asking that, because now we can look that up. Now we
know about the Yule goat
and learn a little bit more about the Yule goat. But yeah, it seems to go back to pagan traditions, like you were talking about with the Yule log and Yule in general. So I think that concludes our program for today. Thank you so much, Marie.
Absolutely. I love talking about Christmas.
And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much for your membership. Yes. We really appreciate it, and have reflected quite a lot on what a challenging but also really rewarding year this has been, thanks to all of you. So we hope you have a wonderful holiday and Christmas, and we'll see you back very soon for our January live streams.
Next year.
That's right.
Bye until 2021.
Bye.